Good morning. I call the State and Local Government Finance and Policy Committee meeting to order on March 21st, 2023. We have a quorum present. A quorum is present. Representative Hewitt, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 17th, 2023?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Hewitt moves approval of the minutes for March 17th. Is there any discussion to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion prevails, and the minutes of March 17th, 2023 are approved. March 17th, 2023 are approved. Okay, we have Representative Greenman in front of us with House File 2483. Our intention is to lay this bill over for possible inclusion. If you would please tell us about your bill and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, state government finance members. I'm grateful to be back here to present House File 2483, a bill to pay off the U.S. Bank Stadium and protect this important asset. This bill is part of the ongoing discussion with various stakeholders, including the city, the state, the Vikings, and MSFA, and represents what we think is a good framework grounded in our shared goals of protecting the public facility and asset of the U.S. Bank Stadium and providing savings and fairness to the state and Minneapolis taxpayers who are on the hook for the public investment made to build and operate the stadium. I should note that people were at very different places at the outset of the conversation of how the stadium will be built. 13 years ago, the decision was made and the stadium is here. It was built with tremendous public investment and effort, and it's an important facility for which our public responsibility remains. Ensuring that the stadium remains a world-class facility is an important goal that all stakeholders share. And we're in a different place now than we were 13 years ago. We're operating off of different information that we know now and things that we didn't know in 2013 when the stadium was originally passed. Specifically, because the revenue in the stadium reserve account has outperformed expectations, we're in a position to pay back the construction bonds early and to save taxpayers significant money on debt service, estimated around $250 million of what is in the stadium reserve to defease the construction bonds nearly 20 years early. As part of this conversation, it's also important to note that although this is the primary obligation the state has to the stadium, the construction bonds are just one of several sources of public taxpayer money going into the stadium. In addition to their share of the debt service on the construction bonds and the repayment of the state advance, the state is retaining taxes from the city of Minneapolis for 3 additional stadium obligations through 2046. Paying into the capital improvement reserve, the operating account, and directly to the MSFA with a little known and murky provision that captures a portion of the city's growth without detail on the statutory purpose and the statutory other than it says in statute for the benefit of the Minnesota Sports Facility Authority. Even after the construction bonds are defeased, the city of Minneapolis and the Vikings will continue to pay millions each year to operate and improve the stadium. And both have expressed the concerns that there are insufficient resources at this point in the capital improvement account necessary to keep the stadium a world-class facility. This bill in front of you takes a holistic approach and looks at how we can be the best stewards of public dollars to maintain, operate, and improve the U.S. Bank Stadium. It does 3 main things. It uses funds from the stadium reserve account to defease the stadium construction bonds. Once the bonds are defeased, it relieves the city of Minneapolis of having to continue to pay debt service payments on bonds that no longer exist. It also addresses the needs identified by the city, by the Vikings, and by MSFA to increase resources available for the capital improvement reserve. All 3 parties have identified that the framework of the original deal is likely insufficient to fund the capital upgrades necessary to keep the stadium a world-class facility as required. What this bill does is it says the city of Minneapolis has made a commitment to increase and propose to increase their contribution to the capital improvement reserve, which is now at about $1.7 million, and they would increase it to $5 million a year. It also keeps with the original structure of the deal, asks the Vikings to match that City of Minneapolis increase and uphold the parity that's in the original deal between the Vikings and the city moving into the capital reserve account. The last thing it does is it eliminates the city taxes captured for the benefit of the Minnesota Sports Facility Association, also referred to as Purpose 5. This tax for the benefit of MSFA provision has a mysterious origin, and it's not known or well understood even by the people who worked on this deal 13 years ago. There's not definition for what the funds are for its purposes, and it has not been well articulated or clear how it's being used. It will cost the city over $250 million over the course of the deal. It's expensive, unnecessary, and should be repealed. Lastly, I would note that this bill is intentionally silent on the future of charitable gambling revenue and the stadium reserve account. That is a different conversation for a different committee and a different day. It does say if the revenue continues, the bill provides a hierarchy, if you will, of how the revenue would flow with the gambling proceeds, but only if they continue to flow. This bill reflects the goals of protecting and investing in a stadium to ensure that it's world-class asset to the state and to the city and to the folks of Minnesota, and to be a good steward to taxpayer contributions and the public investment used to build, operate, and improve the stadium. With that, Madam Chair, we have a few testifiers from Minneapolis and I think the Vikings.
Thank you very much. Would you like to begin with Andrew Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, I would.
Welcome to the committee. If you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Andrew Johnson. I'm a Minneapolis City Council member and the chair of the Intergovernmental Relations for the City of Minneapolis. I want to thank you, Chair Cleavorn, and committee members today for hearing this bill and allowing us to testify. Minneapolis is proud to host the U.S. Bank Stadium in our city. It brings activity to downtown, it brings in visitors from across the state, across the country, and provides immense value for the state of Minnesota as a statewide asset and value as well to the city of Minneapolis. We are committed as a city to ensuring that this remains a world-class facility in partnership with you all, the state, and the Vikings. This committee's previously discussed the topic of retiring the debt for the U.S. Bank Stadium construction bonds early, using the stadium reserve. We wholeheartedly agree that early retirement of the bonds is an idea that makes sense. It'll save taxpayers throughout the state millions of dollars. According to MMB, the bonds will save $226 million. However, without any changes to the current statute, Minneapolis will make an estimated $1 billion in payment towards construction, operations, and maintenance of the stadium. Nearly $2,500 per capita for every man, woman, and child in the city. And we will not share in any of the savings from early payoffs of the bonds. Representative Greenman's bill, thank you for bringing this bill forward, will address this by making changes to ensure that Minneapolis fairly shares in these benefits with all stadium partners, the state and the Vikings. We are grateful for the opportunity to share more about the city's perspective on this important topic, and the city's chief operations officer will go into more details on specific aspects of the bill that the city supports. Again, thank you for the opportunity today, and we look forward to collaborating with you on a fair proposal on the stadium that benefits all partners while maintaining this important statewide asset for the long term.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. We appreciate your testimony and for being here today. Heather Johnston. Welcome to the committee. If you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Cleavorn and committee members. I'm Heather Johnston, Interim City Operations Officer for the City of Minneapolis. I'm pleased to be here to provide some more perspective on this important topic. And thank you to Representative Greenman for her interest in engagement on this as well. There is or will soon be sufficient lawful gaming tax revenue in the stadium reserve to pay off the entire public investment in the stadium construction. And we support that happening. However, we also support the provision of this bill that eliminates the requirement that the City of Minneapolis continues to make debt service payments on the bond after the bonds are repaid. As Councilmember Johnson noted, the city has significant obligations to the stadium beyond just the construction expense. The handout before you, that looks like this, illustrates our projections of the costs and purposes, which are funded by local sales tax, including our downtown restaurant tax and liquor taxes, and importantly, citywide lodging and sales taxes. We support the provisions of Representative Greenman's bill that revisit the original formulas relating to ongoing city obligations in order to ensure that we strike the right balance to support critical capital and operating needs of the stadium while also having sufficient resources to support the cities and as a net contributor of tax revenue to the state, the entire region's ongoing economic recovery. We look forward to additional discussions on the stadium and working with the various bill authors, the Minneapolis delegation, the state of Minnesota, and the Vikings to address the statute to address these additional concerns. Thank you for your work on this topic and on many others of importance to the state. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Operations Officer Johnston. We appreciate your testimony today. Next, we have Lester Bagley, Executive Vice President for the Vikings. If you please state your name for the record and begin your testimony. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Lester Bagley. I'm Executive Vice President of Public Affairs for the Minnesota Vikings. Appreciate the opportunity to testify today, be here to comment on the Vikings' positions or thoughts on the legislation that would pay off U.S. Bank Stadium. First, we're grateful to Governor Walz for his proposal to pay off U.S. Bank Stadium 20 years in advance. We agree that it's fiscally prudent and it would be a great benefit to Minnesota taxpayers. U.S. Bank Stadium has been a tremendous success story, paying the building off 20 years in advance and saving taxpayers literally hundreds of millions of dollars. It would be a continuation of that great success. We're also grateful to the bill authors of the original stadium agreement in 2012 who had the foresight to ensure that our lease or use agreement requires significant obligations from the Vikings, but also requires the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority to operate and maintain U.S. Bank Stadium in a first-class manner similar to and consistent with other comparable NFL stadiums. As a reminder, as part of our 2012 stadium agreements, the Vikings and private sources invested more than $610 million up front to construct the stadium. In addition to the $477 million that was part of the legislation, the Wilf family and the Vikings added an additional $135 million on top of the $477 that we made these financial agreements with the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis. As part of the 2012 legislation, and in addition to the $610 million up front, the Vikings agreed to pay the highest rent in the NFL at $8.5 million each year, increasing annually by 3%. That amount now is $10.2 million. The Vikings paid $10.2 million in rent in 2022. In addition, the Vikings agreed to pay $1.5 million annually for capital reserve contribution, which also grows at 3% annually. The total paid by the Vikings in 2022 was $1.8 million. The Vikings are also responsible for all of our game day expenses, which were $6.5 million in 2022. In exchange for these agreements and financial commitments from the team, the state and the city of Minneapolis made a number of commitments and have obligations to the facility as well. We are appreciative of the legislators who have brought forth proposals to pay off U.S. Bank Stadium. We have a couple of thoughts and recommendations or principles on stadium payoff legislation, that any legislation that moves forward, if you would. One, we appreciate our partnership with the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis. Together, we created an amazing facility. The Vikings are neutral on how the state and the city determine how to pay off that stadium and who benefits from that payoff, as the public share was funded by the state and the city. So we're neutral on how that is sorted out. Two, we would have serious concerns about any provision that attempts to change the terms of the contract that we agreed to in 2012 with respect to future annual capital improvements or operating payments. Those items were agreed to after significant negotiation, and attempts to unilaterally impose new terms would be problematic. And third, we strongly believe that the governor and the legislature should pivot on the robust electronic pull tab collections and use a portion of these funds going forward to fund the long-term capital needs of U.S. Bank Stadium. Electronic pull tabs were created and legalized for this purpose, to fund U.S. Bank Stadium. We think it's prudent to follow through on that directive and use a portion of these ongoing proceeds to protect this amazing asset. We just finished our 7th NFL season in U.S. Bank Stadium, already 7 years under our belt. The MSFA has created or undertaken some work with a stadium designer, Populous, on a stadium master plan to account for the significant improvements and system replacements that are coming due in the not-so-distant future at the stadium. We look forward to the completion of this MSFA study that will help inform the public on the level of future capital investment that will be required and that will keep up U.S. Bank Stadium in a first-class manner.
Mr. Rackley, are you about to wrap up?
Yeah, just
Thank you.
last couple points here. Thank you, Madam Chair. We believe this is the finest stadium in the National Football League and one of the finest venues in the world. It's been a great asset to the state of Minnesota, the city of Minneapolis, our community, and to Viking fans as it delivers an amazing fan experience. U.S. Bank Stadium has been an economic success, being a major catalyst for development downtown East Minneapolis. And during 2022, U.S. Bank Stadium delivered more than 1 million visitors who generate tax receipts and income to the public and private sectors. It has delivered incredibly impactful national events like Super Bowl, NCAA Final Four, X Games, and many others, all of which provide significant economic impact and strengthen our brand as a state. So thank you, Madam Chair. The Vikings are supportive of legislation that would allow for the stadium bonds to be retired. We look forward to being part of a constructive part of the conversation and discussions that go forward. We also look forward to further discussions about the opportunity to address the long-term capital needs of U.S. Bank Stadium. Thank you,
Thank you
Madam
very
Chair.
much for your testimony. We appreciate it. I see no amendments to the bill. Okay, and with that, then we can move to member discussion. Sir, Lead Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the author. On line 4.10 through 4.11, you've got a blank appropriation, and I forgot my dots in my office, or I would have brought them for you. But can you tell us why there's a blank appropriation on that line?
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Nash. And this is the provision that I said was basically a hierarchy. If there continues to be, if the decision is made that there continues to be money in the stadium reserve account, that after paying off the bonds, we'll make a transfer to the capital reserve fund. We haven't made that decision yet as a legislature, and that's why I didn't feel comfortable putting in a number. I think that this is likely to go in an omnibus bill, and that's probably, along with a different conversation, where that will be decided.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'll just comment briefly. I am a co-author on the first bill that we heard, and I believe that that is a better approach. I believe that we do have a need to continue the long-term capital operations, operational operations, and paying off the debt certainly is important. I think in part and parcel we agree, but I also think that it's important that as we as legislators work with stakeholders, that we make sure that we're listening fully to the stakeholders. And we just heard, I think, I don't want to characterize the words, but I don't know that this approach is as warmly received as other pieces of legislation moving through. And I think it's important that we do work on that. I know that Representative Nelson has worked with all the stakeholders, and I think that is probably a little better and more balanced bill for the approach at hand. So while we are not going to be voting on this today, I will not be supporting this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative I'm sorry, Representative Greenman. Representative Nadeau, if you'll come forward with your question.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Greenman. So, we're going to, your bill, and I agree with Representative Nash, Representative Nelson's bill, basically, and I think everyone here agrees that having the ability to pay off these bonds early saves the state of Minnesota a lot of money. The thing that I'm having a problem with in House File 2483 is that, the city of Minneapolis came to the original negotiations in this thing, and they haven't even started paying off their obligation. I mean, I think it was 2021 they made their first payment. Tell me why you think that we should forgive an original partner from their obligation in building this facility. I can't get my head wrapped around that.
Thank you, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Nadeau, and also Representative Nash. I just wanted to say, I agree with you that the stakeholders need to be consulted and agree to this. I think if you remember the last bill we heard, the city of Minneapolis actually testified against it. So when we're talking about stakeholder engagement, I have spent a lot of time with a lot of the stakeholders, and we know that the deal that we have to get to represents all of those stakeholders, not just some. And this is an attempt to continue that conversation as it relates to the city of Minneapolis and the original obligation. I think we know things now that we didn't know then, and it is our job in 2023 to actually be good stewards of both the facility. What we're hearing from MSFA, from the Vikings and the city of Minneapolis is that we actually need to think seriously about the capital reserve account, that the money, the original deal, and the way that was funded is not enough. I think you heard that from the Vikings. I think you heard that from Minneapolis. And so we have, as a legislature, the question is for state. Certainly the question I know that's on the city of Minneapolis's mind, and I'm sure the Vikings, is how do we ensure that we have the capital reserve that we need to continue and to do what I think Mr. Bagley referred to as the master plan, what MSFA has been talking about. The reason we don't yet know how much we need in the capital reserve account in those dots is that MSFA is currently going through this process, and we've been waiting for the number. We've been talking about with them for about 2 months on that. And the other thing I would say, it is our obligation to be good stewards of the information we have now. It doesn't make sense to require a stakeholder to pay debt on bonds that no longer exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Greenman. Representative Nadeau, one
Thank
follow-up.
you, Madam Chair. No, and I think that's great that the debt no longer exists. But there's a partner in here that hasn't paid their fair share. So tell me where the equity is there. We can talk about the ongoing capital problem that we're going to have to make sure that we keep this facility. But what this bill right here does, it basically forgives a bunch of debt for one of the partners that agreed to this in the first case. And the second thing that it does is it basically puts, more obligations on the state and the team to basically come up with more money to fund, in the future. So tell me how that works. It just doesn't work. And I'll stop after this. But I'm obviously not going to support this bill. The Representative Nelson's bill is more straightforward. It allows us to work forward and actually figure out a better way to do it, rather than just I think just this knee-jerk reaction that once the debt's gone, then no one's obligated to pay because the state of Minnesota borrowed the money to the city to begin with. So.
Thank you, Representative Nadeau. And Representative Greenman, I'm going to ask you to keep your response short, because we do have several other bills to move on, and we are laying this over so conversations can continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Nadeau. I think you actually mischaracterized what this bill does, because once the state pays down the bonds, they're out of the deal. And so what it means, though, is the city of Minneapolis and the Vikings, frankly, continue to pay until 2046. There are 4 other obligations other than construction bonds that the city of Minneapolis has to pay, and 3 of them, other than this tax for the benefit of MSFA, that even the original folks who are involved in the deal can't tell when that ended up in the deal or what it's for. But the city of Minneapolis actually proposed to increase the revenue that they're spending and giving to the capital reserve account because that's where the need is. They're continuing to pay on the operating reserve account. And if you look at the handout that you have, that is a significant amount of money, $294 million for operating reserves, $73 million for capital improvement accounts, $66 million for repaying the advances, and $235 million for the MSFA. So I don't think it's fair to I think it mischaracterizes the bill. I'd also say if Minneapolis continues to pay after the bonds have been, and I think this came up in the Senate, after the bonds have been defeased, it'll actually change the proportion of the deal, and Minneapolis will end up paying closer to 50%, as opposed to, I think, the original deal, which was 70-30. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Greenman. And I see no further discussion on the bill, so we will lay it over for possible inclusion. Thank you for being here today and for presenting the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you to your testifiers. Next, we will move on to Representative Fraizer, House File 855. Welcome to the committee, Representative Fraizer. Since you're not a member of the committee, I will move that House File 855 be re-referred to Public Safety, Finance, and the Policy Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
If you would like to present your bill.
Yes, and I'll be brief. 855, I don't think you'll have the most recent version of this bill. Many of the community grants were pulled out. They are now in House File 25. But I'm here today on two issues, and I believe it's the Public Safety Innovation Board and the Civilian Review Board are before you all. The Public Safety Innovation Board was an idea that was crafted last year to provide a board in the Office of OJP to essentially have professionals from the academic realm and also from public safety, and also include public safety stakeholders to be innovative in terms of looking at crime trends, prevention and intervention trends, and to provide best practices and engage with community organizations and law enforcement professionals to provide the best programs possible for the state of Minnesota to ensure that we have safe communities. We are still in constant conversations with the Department of Public Safety and OJP to figure out the best craft for that. So this will be an ongoing conversation, which is why this bill will be laid over in public safety to continue those conversations. I do have Director Kate Weeks here for if you have any specific questions for OJP around this. And then the other, one of the reasons we're really looking to kind of also beef up the capacity for OJP is that what we learned is that there was a huge infusion of federal dollars during the pandemic. But what happened was, with the organizations that typically apply for these grants, they also had a lot of burnout because of the pandemic, and they didn't have the capacity to apply for the grants or to bring those resources in to use them to do the good work that they do in our community. So we're going to provide capacity to OJP to help those grantees to ensure they have that capacity. Also, in light of the most recent auditor report around our nonprofits and the way we deal with the resources that we put out, we want to make sure that we have the capacity there to ensure compliance, to ensure accountability, and also to ensure robust evaluation of these programs. So a lot of detail there about how we're trying to ensure that we have doing what's best for the state of Minnesota and being great stewards of the resources that we have from our taxpayer dollars. And the Civilian Review Board is pretty straightforward and simple. It is giving back the authority to local jurisdictions that was taken away several years ago, and giving them the ability to establish civilian review boards that will have power to conduct investigations and produce facts and findings in conjunction with law enforcement. And that is it.
Okay, and that language is permissive, is that correct?
That language is permissive.
Right, thank you. I appreciate your bringing the bill before us. Members, I don't see any amendments, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we'll move on to member questions, if that's all. Or
I do believe we have one testifier here.
right?
That's all right.
Welcome to the committee. I've always appreciated your testimony when I served on public safety.
Goodness gracious. Sorry about this.
That's all right.
Wayward chair. My apologies.
If you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
Thank you, Chair Cleaver and members. My name is Michelle Gross, and I am the president of the organization Communities United Against Police Brutality. We are an organization in our 23rd year, and I want to just mention that previously I have served as the chair of the Civilian Review Authority redesign for the city of Minneapolis, and have done a lot of work on civilian oversight over the years, such that I am actually brought in sometimes by municipalities to discuss civilian oversight. What I think is important about this bill is that it is permissive. And so law enforcement, often states that their goal is to improve trust between members of the community and law enforcement, and that's a lofty goal. It's a great goal. And it's best served when agencies are willing to meet community standards for how they wish to be policed, and by the transparency afforded by a civilian oversight body. The language in House File 855 states that communities may create civilian oversight councils and may grant them certain powers. During prior testimony, representatives of outstate communities have said at times that they don't have problems in their communities, and that's great. But, and that means that those communities would probably choose not to set up a civilian oversight body. But in the community that I live in, which is Minneapolis, there have been problems, and we have to be realistic about those problems. And people in my community are eager to have the opportunity to make real civilian oversight that will allow them to make findings of fact and actually truly investigate cases. And so this just gives us the opportunity to do what we need to do in our community, and it doesn't change anything for those communities where there isn't an issue. And so those are important. There are no statutes in Minnesota that prevent communities from enacting, say, a firefighter oversight body, an ambulance oversight body, even a librarian oversight body, if that's something they choose to do. This bill simply levels the playing field. It means that all of the communities can decide for themselves what kinds of oversight they wish to have for the services that are provided to them by their governments. In 2012, civilian oversight bodies were stripped of the ability to operate effectively as a check and balance against police misconduct. Had these bodies been given that adequate power to truly serve an oversight function, it is unlikely that former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, with his 26 civilian complaints and 4 prior deadly force incidents, would have remained an employee of the city of Minneapolis long enough to have had his 5th deadly force encounter with George Floyd. Thus, I urge you to approve House File 855. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here and for your testimony. Member questions? Lead Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to make sure I heard the author correctly, that this is not the actual engrossment that you're working from, so we're referring something back that we don't actually have possession of the appropriate copy?
Well, sorry.
Through the chair, if you would.
That's all right. Representative Fraizer.
Madam Chair, Representative Nash, the only changes in this would be the fact that these grants that are in here are no longer a part of the bill. The Civilian Review Board piece is the same. The Innovation Board, that language is the same.
I would like to clarify, Mr. Gehring tells me that we have the proper engrossment.
Well, Madam Chair, I'd like to get clarification on that, because the author himself said that this is not the same, and yet we're being asked to send something back to committee that is, by the author's admission, not the correct
Mr.
engrossment.
Gehring.
Madam Chair, Representative Nash, I can't speak to what Representative Fraizer is referencing, but the specific bill draft that's in front of the committee, House File 855, is referred and is in the possession of State Government Finance.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I can clear.
We'll move to Representative Nadeau. Your question, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Representative Fraizer. This, in section, basically, I think it's Article 1, Section 1, the Public Safety Innovation Board. I mean, this is very similar to what, it's kind of a CJCC component that has been really successful in Hennepin County, where all law enforcement partners, public defenders, courts, the criminal justice partners come together and really do try to find those areas of efficiency. This is where electronic filing came from CJCC. So there's, I think there's real value in Section 1. my concern, and thank you for talking with me yesterday about your bill. I really appreciate it. My concern is that having a statewide approach, we might lose that. Criminal justice is really parochial, I guess, and I'm worried that it will not displace CJCC or the opportunity for that, but I'm worried that it will overshadow, become more important, and not meet those individual communities where they are. Can you talk to me a little bit? I know that I'm out there vague a little bit. I'm really worried that this is going to take away. This is going to take away from local jurisdictions' ability, not ability to collaborate, but overshadow, and have more focus on a state program. And then we'll start trying to, apply for grants to fund, and it has a tendency to move away from the lowest level. And I want to make sure that, I know that wouldn't be your intent, but I want to make sure that this is not going to get in the way.
Representative Fraizer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Nadeau, thank you. And I often forget how much time you spent in Hennepin County, so I appreciate your perspective. Yeah, that is absolutely not the intent. So I can assure you that, and I can assure you that in conversations with OJP, it is not their intent to take over any of the local entities that have these type of organizations in place now to make sure they are having the types of efficiencies and effective work in their communities. And that would be important for me as I work closely with the Hennepin County Commission to ensure that we have what's necessary for our communities to keep our communities safe. I wouldn't want to impede on that at all. So I can guarantee you that is not the intent of this. And in fact, the idea is that we can find more resources so that our local county commissioners in those entities that are collaborating together will have the ability to apply for those resources, to bring more resources to their communities, to implement more programs that they are being innovative about, to make sure that we can resource them well. So that's the plan.
Thank you. One follow-up. Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be done. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right. Lead Nash.
Yes, Madam Chair. I know a number of groups are in opposition to this. I know this gives some fairly wide authority to the citizen oversight groups. I think they have subpoena power and some other things that they've been granted. I do think this is a little bit heavy-handed, and you're making a referral back to the committee, and I'm going to ask for a roll call on that re-referral.
A roll call has been requested. Representative Fraizer, do you want to comment before? How about if you close up your bill, and then we'll do the roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a bill that has been worked on closely with many stakeholders. We're trying to strike a fair balance. In regards to the civilian review boards, we are returning power that was taken away by the legislature. So you talk about local authority and local power. We're giving that back. Representative Nash, I know you were a former mayor. You'd want that back. So thank you for that. So we're giving that power back. We'll continue to work with those stakeholders to try to figure out something fair and balanced. And we just want to make sure we're doing what's best for our communities to keep them safe.
Thank you, Representative Fraizer. And with that, I will renew my motion that House File 855 be re-referred to the Public Safety, Finance, and Policy Committee. And with that, will you please take the roll?
Chair Cleavorn?
Aye.
Chair Cleavorn, aye. Vice Chair Hewitt?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hewitt, aye. Representative Nash?
No.
Representative Nash? No. Representative Bonner?
Aye.
Representative Bonner? Aye. Representative Freiberg?
Yes.
Representative Freiberg? Aye. Representative Hansen?
Aye.
Representative Hansen? Aye. Representative Harder?
No.
Representative Harder? No. Representative Herr?
Aye.
Representative Herr? Aye. Representative Joy?
No.
Representative Joy? No. Representative Koznick?
No.
Representative Koznick? No. Representative Nadeau?
No.
Representative Nadeau? No. Representative Newton?
Aye.
Representative Newton? Aye. The ayes are 7, the nays are 5, and 1 excused.
With 7 ayes, 5 nays, 1 excused, the motion prevails, and House File 855 is re-referred to the Public Safety, Finance, and Policy Committee. Thank you, Representative Fraizer. Next on our agenda today, we have House File 2250, Representative Newton. Representative Newton, you are on the committee, and so it is our intention to lay this bill over for possible inclusion. If you would please present the bill.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. House File 2250 is a bill for $850,000 to do upgrades on a portion of the roof at the National Sports Center Ice Arena. This roof is the back portion of the arena. There are two sections there. The front portion was damaged, and that covers 4 of the ice sheets. And as a result of the damage, the roof has to be repaired. So our timing is such that we want to install solar on the back portion of the arena, but we need to upgrade the roof and to do it at the same time that we're repairing the front portion of the roof. With me, I have Neil Ladd, who's the Deputy Executive Director for the Sports Center, and I would like to turn testimony over to him.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the committee. If you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Neil Ladd, Director, Deputy Executive Director for the National Sports Center and the Amateur Sports Commission. Just real quickly, this was a part of an original ask of $5 million from the RDF funds, and the infrastructure for that RDF fund request was subtracted off. So it was $5 million minus the roof repair, which is the $850, which is in the House File 2250 before you today. It's a non-energy, non-related expense, and so we subtracted it off there and put it in here. One of the things that I think is really interesting about this is the National Sports Center is very innovative as it comes to energy. If you think about our largest costs at the National Sports Center, over $1 million is spent on energy alone. So we're trying to do our best with state taxpayers' dollars. We have 6 electric Zambonis. We have over 100 electric golf carts. So this would be a great fit to reduce some of those energy-related costs and get more bang for the buck, so to speak, for the taxpayers of the state of Minnesota.
Thank you. Whenever people use abbreviations, I just ask them to please state what the abbreviation means. You used RDF.
Renewable Development Fund, sorry.
Thank you very much. Right. Members, I see no amendments to this bill. Is there any member discussion? Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. RDF refused to fund it because it didn't meet their scope for the structural improvements to hold the solar panels. Is that the case? Why did they cut out the 855 or 850?
Madam Chair, the original request, Representative Nadeau, was for $5 million to the Energy Committee, and that included the upgrade of the roof. And because the upgrade isn't a portion of, it isn't something that the RDA would cover, that bill is still before them for $4,150,000.
So it's a substructure question, is
That's
that what I'm
correct.
asking? Or what you're answering? Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it was an ineligible cost reimbursement from the RDF fund. That was the only thing I was getting at. If they could have funded it, I'm assuming they would have. Correct?
Yes, but it's not a part of what is normally considered energy.
Yep.
Because it's the upgrading of the roof.
Thank you very much. One follow-up.
Yep. And what are the calculated energy savings that this will, that this total installation will provide, including, I mean, if you can give me just a basic year pay, return on investment, including the $850,000, that would be great.
Mr. Ladd.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. This will reduce the energy cost by about 20%, up to about 20% for the National Sports Center.
Thank you.
And their costs, Madam Chair,
Representative Newton.
their annual costs are close to $1 million right now. So the estimated savings is in the neighborhood of $200,000 a year.
Is that
And the return on investment, so what's the payoff? I don't know what the solar installation is. I mean, if it's $5 million, I was just wondering the payoff.
the bill before us is for $850,000. Mr. Ladd, do you have an answer for that? Or maybe a break-even point?
Madam Chair, members, less than 20 years.
Thank you very much. Lead Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the author. Mr. Ladd talked about a lot of different forms of energy. What form of energy do they use at the National Sports Center to cut their grass?
Mr. Ladd.
I'm still hoping, Representative Nash, that you'll get on my bill for electric lawnmowers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was tongue-in-cheek to bring a little levity to the committee, but I would like a firmer number, as Representative Nadeau was leaning towards, as to the actual ROI of this effort. Solar panels have a shelf life, and if we're going to make an investment in really a worthy facility, it would be nice to know that there is a payoff that can be measured in actual benefit, because they do have a usable life, and if the usable life of those is actually less than the rate of return, then that's troubling. So I don't know where this bill, is this being laid over, or?
The bill is being laid over, and the bill itself is for the basic repair of the roof. It is not for the solar panels. I know you understand that, but we can ask for the information to be provided to the committee.
Well, Madam Chair, I would direct your attention to line 1.9 at the end of the line. It is talking directly about solar panels in the bill, so I think it's germane to the question, germane to the bill, so it would be nice to be able to get that number. And this is not adversarial, Madam Chair. This is a facility that, as you've heard me say on Friday of last week, I support them, but it's in the bill, so it would be nice to figure out what that measurement is.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, if I might add, the estimated payoff period is between 20 and 25 years, depending on electric costs. Some of those things will vary over time.
Thank you very much. Representative Joy, normally we end with Lead Nash. One question, please.
I think the average life of a solar panel is what, 25 to 30 years is what they estimate? Okay. So 20 years payoff, so. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will conclude there and lay this bill over for possible inclusion. Thank you, Representative Newton.
Madam Chair.
And
Thank
Mr.
you,
Ladd
members.
for being with
Thank
us
you.
today. Our next bill up is House File 1859, Representative Feist. Welcome to the committee, Representative Feist.
Thank you. My testifier, one of my testifiers is on his way from a kitty doctor appointment for any members, and we have another testifier as well. Hi, are you Kevin? Yeah. Okay, good.
All right,
Thanks.
are you comfortable with beginning?
Yeah.
All right, Representative Feist, since you're not a member of the committee, I will re-refer House File 1859, be re-referred to Ways and Means Committee. And with that, if you will please explain your bill.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. And did you want to start with the amendment or afterwards?
We can begin with the A3.
Okay.
I will move that the A3 to House File 1859 be before the committee to your amendment.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. This just strikes language referring to the Attorney General's office because they already have that power, so it was just redundant language. It doesn't actually change anything substantive.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion to the A3? Seeing none, all those in favor of the adoption, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion prevails and the A3 is adopted. To your bill 1859 as amended.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. This bill is to address wage theft in the construction industry. 1 in 5 construction workers in Minnesota is likely to experience being misclassified, paid off the books, and or having their wages stolen. In 2019, we passed a wage theft law that was a step in the right direction, but it has not addressed this issue, and it remains very prevalent. Under this bill, construction contractors and project owners engaging in subcontracting of labor on their construction projects are liable for unpaid wages and damages stemming therefrom of the subcontractors performing work under their control. Notably, this bill provides more tools to enable general contractors to prevent wage theft by requiring that contractors are entitled to a variety of information about the payroll practices of their subcontractors, so they can prevent those subcontractors from violating the act, and thereby preventing more violations of the act and avoiding liability. This will ensure that the construction workers subjected to wage theft have recourse to collect unpaid wages from contractors and to incentivize the hiring of responsible contractors by placing the responsibility to prevent wage theft on those with the most control over the construction labor practices. This bill is well designed. The burden should be on the person who has the most control rather than the one who has the least control. And I would like to mention that we are working on an amendment, continuing to have conversations with stakeholders. We're going to add some clarification on what timely notice is. We're going to eliminate some language about general contractors being able to withhold payment, because I know that is a concern. We're also looking at providing procedural clarity on the process as between generals and subcontractors. And the reason we're here in this committee is because there are provisions relating to the Department of Labor and Industry and also the Attorney General's office.
Thank you very much. And you have testifiers with you today. If you would like to state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
Thank you, Representative Claiborne, Chair. My name is Kevin Pranis, and I'm here on behalf of LiUNA, Minnesota, North Dakota.
Thank you. And your testimony, please.
Thank you. We appreciate Representative Feist bringing this bill forward. I think a lot of the work has been done by the Carpenters Union. Our union is fully in support of this and appreciates their efforts. The Carpenters have been a real leader on the issue of preventing wage theft, which is endemic in Minnesota. The surveys suggest that I believe the number is about a fifth or a quarter of construction workers are experiencing wage theft. This is incredibly widespread. For those not familiar with construction, it may be hard to believe, but in the construction industry, it's quite common for workers to be paid off the books or to be told that they need to be independent contractors to avoid tax liability, to avoid workers' compensation and insurance liability that affects all taxpayers. I think the relevant issue with the bill for this committee is that it is simply not feasible, nor is it reasonable to expect the taxpayers to fund what the industry should be doing to police itself. Right now, the Department of Labor and Industry, we support the hiring of additional investigators, but the truth is that it would take an army of 500 or 1,000 investigators to be on construction sites on a regular basis, to talk to workers, to document the cases of wage theft. I mean, our staff of other building trades can't even keep up with the number of cases, right? There's a bottleneck in terms of prosecuting those. And the truth is that general contractors could solve all of these problems because they're in the best position. They both have all the information needed and can access all the information needed to know if workers are being paid correctly. And they have all of the power and authority needed to ensure that their contractors are following the law. And I would just cite a couple of examples where we found that the buck stops nowhere in construction. One, if you look at the DigiKey project, there was a major state investment in the DigiKey project in Thief River Falls. We discovered by talking to workers that there were workers who were being paid a fraction of what they should have been earning on that project, which was supposed to be covered by prevailing wage rates. Not only were there huge underpayments that resulted ultimately in over $300,000 in payments from the contractor for more than a year's worth of work for dozens of workers, but after the problem was brought to the attention of the general contractor and the project owner, the underpayments continued for months, 6 or 8 months after it was made public. And the reason is the general contractor had no incentive to fix the problem. Instead, they said, well, it sounds like a question for labor and industry. So taxpayer dollars are spent for an investigation that lasted, maybe 6 or 8 months to document these underpayments and resulting in these workers finally getting their money back, instead of the general contractor stepping up, taking responsibility, and fixing the problem going forward. Similarly, we had a case where a very large area retailer, acting as its own general contractor, hired a subcontractor who, according to sworn testimony from workers, engaged in widespread wage theft, including, in this case, a worker who was never paid at all for his work, worked there for about 2 weeks, quit because the conditions were unacceptable, and the contractor refused to pay him, and then said that they would only pay him if he agreed to falsely file as an independent contractor, because they had never signed him up on payroll to begin with. And despite that, 6 months later, this worker is still not paid. This was brought to the attention of the large retailer, large and well-known retailer that was responsible for the project. And again, it still took another 6 months for that worker to get paid because the general contractor had no incentive to resolve the situation, because the buck stops nowhere in construction. And so we strongly support this bill. We think it's reasonable, and this will bring more money in terms of the taxes that contractors should be paying on the workers that are being misclassified, and it would also reduce the need to spend significant taxpayer sums chasing after contractors that the general contractor in charge of the project should be taking responsibility for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pranis, for your testimony. Next, we have Adam Dunnick. If you'd please state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Adam Dunnick. I'm here. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters. Thanks for the opportunity to present this morning. Representative Feist did an outstanding job explaining what the bill is and what it does. Mr. Pranis from LiUNA did a great job of explaining why it's so needed and why we support it. I just want to add, I guess, another word or two about that. Because some might be asking themselves, why are we still working on the issue of wage theft after we passed a really big bill in 2019? Well, the reason is that bill isn't working for workers in construction. It mostly isn't working for workers in construction because their direct employer usually controls a lot about their life that they don't have a lot to say about. And so they have to navigate a complicated web of who their real employer is. They have to navigate sometimes a complicated web of how to file a complaint and work that through a process through the Department of Labor and Industry. And we think that this bill will ultimately lead to better outcomes for workers, and it will clarify the chain of command as some of the points that Kevin just made in his testimony. The status quo just isn't working. And this bill is about workers. I just want to reiterate that. We had great testimony in other committees from workers. We're not bringing them to every committee, but if you had taken a listen to what you heard from workers in the labor committees in the House and Senate, it's pretty heartbreaking stuff that they had to talk about. And I give them a lot of credit for having the courage to step forward. There was also an article in the newspaper this past, a little over a week ago that summarized that. So I'll use their own words. We want justice. We want a system that works for us. Lastly, I just want to thank Representative Feist for her great work on this bill and bringing people together. We have made this bill better. We've made some amendments along the way. We're still working on one with some subcontractors that I think will tighten up some language as well. I'm happy to answer questions and be around as a resource, but thanks for the opportunity to say a few words this morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunick. We appreciate your being with us. Next, we will have Brian Dahl. Brian Dahl. It doesn't appear to be with us at this moment. Peter Coyle.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Peter Coyle. I'm the legislative counsel to the Housing First Minnesota. Housing First Minnesota is the state's largest trade association dedicated to the housing industry, its builders, its suppliers, and its subcontractors. Let me start by acknowledging the effort of Representative Feist and thanking her for meeting with us a few weeks back to share with her our concerns about the bill and why we continue to object to the bill. And the reasons are really quite simple. We acknowledge that there are individuals who've been harmed through wage theft, and I listened to the testimony that's been referenced, and those claims are genuine and they are worthy of response by the Department of Labor and Industry. But that's the first point. I've participated in multiple hearings on this bill, and not once has the Department of Labor and Industry itself or the Attorney General's office been present and testified that there's a problem. We passed a very aggressive wage theft law 3 years ago, and those agencies have that authority to enforce those restrictions, and yet none of them are here today asking for passage of this bill. Our second concern is that Minnesota is already an outlier as a high-cost state for the construction of housing. In our opinion, this bill will make it worse, and it's not something that we think the state should be doing at this time. The law sets out a very complicated and expensive regulatory scheme whereby general contractors have to now be responsible for the activities of their subcontractors who are legally independent companies. The generals do not have control over hiring. They do not have control over payment of wages. And therefore, we think that cost burden, if you will, is going to be forced onto the general contractors, particularly smaller ones, who are not well equipped to implement the law. And the ultimate effect is that it's going to make housing that much more expensive and make Minnesota that much more of an outlier. So for those reasons, Madam Chair and members of the committee, we urge that the committee not adopt the bill in its current form. Happy to take questions if you have any for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coyle. And next we will have Brooke Broadson. Thank you, with the League of Minnesota Cities. Thank you for being with us. If you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Cleavorn and members. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Brooke Bordson, and I'm with the League of Minnesota Cities, which represents 837 cities across the state. And I'll just briefly touch on concern related to municipal contracting in cities. Under the new definitions in the bill, starting on line 3.25, a city as a project owner could be deemed a contractor in certain circumstances and liable for all claims as such. Because public projects are funded with taxpayer dollars, municipalities as project owners are subject to unique requirements under the state's Uniform Municipal Contracting Law, and other statutes. Competitive bidding laws exist to ensure taxpayers get the best obtainable price, to level the playing field for contractors to win public contracts, and to limit the discretion of officials to avoid bias or favoritism in awarding contracts. So for example, for projects over $175,000, the city has to use a sealed bid process and accept the lowest responsible bid. Minnesota Statute 574.26 also requires public projects over $175,000 to include a payment bond. For projects where a payment bond has been obtained, subcontractors and workers can make a claim against the bond for wages that they're owed. We would request that language be added to the bill, clarifying that these new provisions would not apply when a city has required a contractor to provide a payment bond for a project. Without this clarification, there may be confusion about whether a claimant could file two claims for a payment, one from the city and one under the bond, or how those claims should be reconciled. And I'll stop there, but I do want to thank Representative Feist again for continuing to take the time to talk about our concerns, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate the work you do for our communities. Next, Representative Feist, do you want to say anything before we go to member questions?
I could respond. Sure. So I just wanted to point out that the Department of Labor and Industry and the AG's office are supportive of this effort. They are doing their best to address wage theft and believe that this will be an important tool in addressing it in Minnesota.
Thank you. I forgot to ask if there was anyone else from the public who wanted to testify. Okay, seeing none, we'll go to member questions. Representative Bonner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Feist. You know, I have to be honest with you. I am so tired of this conversation. I am so tired of the fact that we have such a rampant problem with wage theft that we have to continue to have this conversation. And for industry to look there and turn a blind eye and claim that it's not happening and ask why the AG isn't here to show up for certain enforcement issues, I have to be honest with you, if the AG were to show up for every wage for every time someone was disenfranchised, the AG and none of us would ever leave this room. This is ridiculous. And it is unconscionable that the industry is not doing their part to fix it. We are here today expressly because the industries and the contractors who are responsible for paying their workers are not doing it. I can tell you that I have many folks in my family who have done everything from drywall and insulation to plumbing and HVAC. And every person I can talk to has some story of being cheated. Literally everyone. This is not a one-off kind of thing or, oh, it just happens here and there. I'm sorry, Mr. Coyle, but that is not the case. This is ridiculous. Thank you, Representative Feist, for making an attempt to do something when others have not. And to the contractors and to the folks out there, to the employers, it is time for you to get your house in order and get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bonner. Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just you know, this is a complex issue, and Representative Bonner, I really respect your viewpoint, but you know, this is not there are avenues. You know, the two examples that one of the testifiers brought up DigiKey and then the second example. I mean, everything in the second example was unlawful. And there's contractors out there that can't get paid by people. They build, they do improvements to people's houses, and those people refuse to pay them. And there's a process that they have to go through. They have to go to court in order to get money. They pre-file liens. And don't get me wrong, I agree with you. Anybody that steals money from somebody, that needs to be solved. But this is not simply, you know, born on the back and saying that, you know, most contractors are bad people. They're not. They basically put everything on the line every day to try to do a good job. This bill, and thank you, Representative Feist, for bringing this bill. I know that regardless of where it goes, you're going to continue to work on this bill, and you're going to try to make it better. I do have some concerns. Putting the liability on general contractors, I think is difficult. Even though, you know, the AG and Dolly are supportive, there is an avenue that is being unused. If there's a way that we can try to bolster that, I think it would be better. I think the biggest issue that I have with this particular approach and is that the workforce and subcontractors are super mobile, especially in the ones who are at risk of not being paid. You know, and so I don't know if it's going to solve the worst part of it, and maybe it will. Maybe it will. But my biggest concern is that I think it's going to limit these small to mid-sized contractors from being able to grow in a reasonable way. And I know that you would never intend to do that. You know, I think what we really should bolster those systems that we have, wrap our arms around those people. And I have one question: is our union, our signatory companies exempt from? They're not exempt from your bill.
Representative Feist.
So they are, actually. We have a number of exemptions. I was trying to be short in my intro comments, but I can go through those. So projects that are engaged in a collective bargaining agreement and we expanded that exemption, would not be subject to this bill. Projects that are subject to prevailing wage laws would not be subject to this bill. Small, single-family, and I believe two-family residential projects would be exempt from this bill, and homeowners who directly contract with subcontractors would be exempt. And the reason is that those are all scenarios where we thought that workers already had recourse, and that wage theft was unlikely to exist, and also just not to place that burden on individual homeowners.
Representative Nadeau, one follow-up. There are other members.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Thank you. I think that makes it even more difficult for me, because, you know, carving out certain, I think making those carve-outs is creating an uneven playing field. You know, I think there's a real opportunity for non-signatory contractors to become signatory, and I don't know if this is. I think that this hurts that. I think this is. Again, I agree and recognize and agree with what you're trying to do. I just don't think this is the path. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Harder. And we are going to try to wrap up this morning's session on time. So if you'll state your question, please.
Thank you, Chair Cleavorn. Representative Feist. I do agree that people should get paid for the work that they do. I guess I'm not aware as to how often that this happens. Do you have any data that you could share with me at some point? How often is the state dealing with complaints such as this?
Representative Feist. Yep, thank you. Thank you for the question. So approximately 50% of construction projects have wage theft. 1 in 5 workers, or approximately 23% of workers in construction, are subjected to wage theft. So it's hugely prevalent. And I would say, you know, initially I had some talking points in my first presentation that was like, you know, the industry is set up to be susceptible to wage theft, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's, like, I understand based on conversations with stakeholders why we created this general contractor subcontractor model, and I don't think it was created for the purpose of wage theft, but I do think it is uniquely susceptible to it because we have so many of these layers, and so I do feel that it is or I know it is very prevalent and that we need to do something about it.
Representative Carter, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. So do we know, is this concentrated in certain areas of the state, or is this statewide that we're seeing problems with this?
Representative Feist.
It's statewide.
Thank you. Representative Kosnick.
Thank you. And, you know, I was originally, a couple years back, I didn't really understand what wage theft was. And I appreciate the efforts of the advocates to inform the Jobs Committee back then that I was on. And I supported the original bill. And I recognized the testimony that says the original bill isn't working or needs to be tweaked a little bit. But I think this bill goes too far. I also wanted to point out, we just accepted the A3 amendment. And we talked about the Attorney General being here or not being here. But the author brought forth an amendment that actually strikes the Attorney General enforcement in certain parts within the bill. And so that's helpful in some ways, but we can't sit here and say that the Attorney General, if they were, they're a major statewide agency and they have people that monitor all the bills that we do here, and they chose not to be here to weigh in on this bill and apparently haven't on throughout the process. We can take the author's testimony that they are supportive of the bill, but also the author recognizes that the bill needs some work a little bit. And so I look forward to hearing what revisions you have. It is an important issue, but this bill goes a little too far. One of the main issues that we have is the cost of housing, and we're trying to study and take on how do we create more affordable housing and keep housing that's not technically termed affordable, but regular market rate housing. How do we keep that cost down? As was mentioned, that we're one of the highest housing costs in the region, and this bill doesn't help that at all, unless I misunderstood something, but I'm pretty certain it does not reduce the cost of housing. And so I look forward to your continuing working with the industry partners, all of them, so that we can make sure that people are paid what they signed up for. I think that's important and that's noble, but this bill is heavily one-sided. And I think just the assumption of liability at the top end for the general contractors is needs a lot more work, and it's a little heavy. One of the other testifiers, suggested that maybe 500 or 1,000 more Dolly investigators might be needed. I think that's more of a, I don't know that that's data-driven, but I think the point is fine. That could be a better approach than to put on the burden to kind of self-regulate in some ways, because I'm not sure that will necessarily work. And that is the purpose.
I'd like to let Representative Feist answer your question, if I can just ask you to wrap up.
I didn't really have a question. I'm making more of a statement about the bill, and I'm encouraging her to continue to work on it, Madam Chair. And this is the committee. That's our.
There was a question I wanted to be able to answer. You asked about the AG's office and why those lines were removed. Representative Feist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So those lines were only removed because they were redundant. The AG already has enforcement authority under Chapter 181, and this is within 181, and we actually were working with them on this, and so they have been heavily involved, and they were the ones who suggested this. And can I respond to others, or? Okay.
Please.
Yeah, and I definitely am interested in continuing to have the conversations. I think it's really important to get stakeholder input, in particular on a very technically complicated bill like this. I do feel like the status quo is one-sided in favor of industry, and we're trying to shift that balance. From the people who have no control, oftentimes don't know who they're working for. Oftentimes the people they're working for control their housing. Oftentimes they have language barriers. And so currently they have no power. And we're trying to shift it to the people who do have power. But I hear you that the construction industry is a very complex industry, that a construction project is very complex with many moving pieces. And I do want to get the balance right. So I'm happy to continue to have those conversations.
And thank you, Representative Kosnick, for raising the issues that you raised. I appreciate that.
Well, I look forward to the author continuing to work on this bill instead of jamming it through. And thank you, Madam Chair, for your time.
Thank you, Representative Kosnick. Lead Nash.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I will do my very best to keep measured, because I've heard some things that I would say were based in rampant emotionalism. But I want to address a quote from the LIUNA testifier that says, "The buck stops nowhere in construction." And I'm just going to say that's an outrageous comment. That is utterly outrageous. That is making a blanket statement on every person that works in the construction industry that is an owner or a general contractor, and that is garbage. I know a lot of these people. Some of these people are some of my closest friends. And to make that statement, sir, is outrageous. Because they do take responsibility. And many of them are unbelievably conscientious. And they go to the mat to make sure that they are doing good work. Yesterday evening, I had a conversation with my friend, Mr. Dunnick, and Mr. Dunnick knows that I advocate for the trades quite loudly. And I do work super hard to make sure that we are doing things that touch all aspects of the construction industry to make things better for the construction industry. I told him at that time that I have a lot of friends, and we have until 10 o'clock, Madam Chair, so
We have two agencies who are here also to report.
I understand.
Thank you.
But this bill is what we have in front of us.
I'm not stopping you, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a number of friends who are general contractors and subcontractors, and when I shared this bill with them and then when they brought their concerns to me, they are terrified of this. That it is a heavy-handed approach that makes subcontractors compliant with things that they would never reveal to people, potential trade secrets, employee information, and all in the name of something that all of us agree should not happen. But I would point out that what we're trying to do is pass another law when Dolly has the ability, and the author has said that already, that Dolly has the ability to enforce these laws currently. I have not heard any data from Dolly that says that there is a problem here and that this is as rampant a problem as is being alleged. And I liken it to the mentality that things are out of control from one person's perspective or a group's perspective. So let's pass more and more and more and more and more laws when we're not enforcing the ones we have already. That's equally outrageous, sir, that we're going to try to fix something when we're not enforcing the laws that we already have. However, I know in talking to a lot of my friends that they, Representative Bonner, are conscientious. And assuming that industry, and you picked on Mr. Coyle and the home builders, it is, again, outrageous to make blanket statements of that level to say that all people in construction are outrageously offensive and abusing this law. That is craziness. There is a concern on our side, and we do support making sure that wage theft does not happen. And Representative Feist, you know when I say that, I mean that. That is a concern. That is not a proper behavior. People should get paid what they agreed to get paid. But what this bill does is it brings a 20-pound sledgehammer to a finish hammer problem, in my opinion. And what we're doing is we are going to force, effectively, non-union companies to be held accountable to something that union companies are not. And I'm with Representative Nadeau on this. That makes it more problematic.
Representative
So,
Knapp.
Madam Chair, I will be done in 1
I'm just
second.
going to ask you, you and I have worked in a very civil way, and I can see that passions are high on this. We as a committee are not impugning the behavior of good contractors.
Madam Chair, we did hear it from Representative Bonner, and we did hear it from
I'm just going to
Liuna.
say, we have been told today that 25 or 23% or 23% of workers are subjected to wage theft.
Well, Madam Chair, I would
That
love to see
means-
that data.
That means that many more are not as well. So please, if you'll just, I just want to bring
I
the
will wrap it
temperature
up, and
down.
I
just want to bring the
I
temperature down.
beg your indulgence.
So we can all hear.
Because this drastically impacts
Mm-hmm.
many of the people who are my closest friends in the world.
But what I want you to know is that when voices rise at a table, it makes it more difficult for people to hear the important comments you want to make.
Madam
That's
Chair,
all I'm saying.
I would ask you to also hold Representative Bonner to that same level of accountability, because that did not happen.
I'm speaking to all members of our committee. Thank you.
I will close. I think, again, that this is a very heavy-handed approach, Representative Feist, and you and I are also friends. We've had coffee together. We've tried to find common ground on many things. I would encourage you to meet with stakeholders, including the stakeholders on this side of the aisle, because if you're asking for our vote, you're asking for us to come to the table and be stakeholders as well. I have not heard that. Representative Nadeau brought up concerns, Representative Harder, Representative Koznick. I know Representative Joy feels similarly. Let's not go down the road of making blanket statements like the buck stops nowhere in construction and going on the assumption that every general contractor, subcontractor is a bad actor. because that's what this bill very much feels like. And I don't buy into that for 1 second. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Nash. And Representative Feist, I'll let you close up the bill and address whatever issues you would like with Lead Nash's comments.
Great, thank you. Representative Nash, I appreciate your comments. In response, I'd just like to make a few points. The data sharing that's part of this bill would be providing evidence of information that the parties already have shared with one another. So a general contractor already knows from the bid what the subcontractor plans to pay their workers, how much they plan to bill them out at, how many of them they have, what they'll be classified as. So that information is not secret between the parties. I just wanted to make that point because I think it is important. It was a question I had. In talking with the Department of Labor and Industry, they have said that this bill will make their job easier, that right now they do struggle to have the staff to investigate wage theft, and that having access to this data will help. So I just wanted to make that point as well. The data is real, it is pervasive, and I'm happy to share it with you. And I would like to make the point, 1 in 5 workers is subjected to wage theft. That's incredibly and unacceptably high, but it also means that 4 in 5 workers aren't. So I'm certainly not coming in here and saying that every contractor and subcontractor is trying to get away with something. And I do think that this bill actually levels the playing field between good actors who are doing right by their workers, who have really strong business ethics, and those who aren't good actors. So I think this is important for competition. And I think I'll leave it at that. I would be very happy to meet with you. I think that my colleagues I'm working with on this will tell you that I'm annoying about how many people I'm willing to meet with and hear out and try to work with on amendments. I think it is a really important part of this process. So I'll just close by saying this is a really important bill. We are trying to shift the balance of power. I realize that. But I think it's incredibly important. It's going to address an issue in a meaningful way that it must be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I'll request a roll call on the referral.
Oh, thank you very much. A roll call has been requested. And with that, I will renew my motion that House File 1859 as amended be re-referred to Ways and Means. And with that, we will please take the roll.
Chair Cleavorn?
Aye.
Chair Cleavorn, aye. Representative Hewitt?
Aye.
Representative Hewitt, aye. Representative Nash?
No.
Representative Nash, no. Representative Bonner?
Aye.
Representative Bonner, aye. Representative Freiberg?
Yes.
Representative Freiberg, aye. Representative Hansen?
Aye.
Representative Hansen, aye. Representative Harder?
No.
Representative Harder, no. Representative Herr?
Aye.
Representative Herr, aye. Representative Joy?
No.
Representative Joy, no. Representative Koznick?
No.
Representative Koznick, no. Representative Nadeau?
No.
Representative Nadeau, no. Representative Newton?
Aye.
Representative Newton, aye. The ayes are 7, the nays are 5, with 1 excused.
With 7 ayes, 5 nays, and 1 excused, the motion prevails, and House File 1859, as amended, is re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you. Next, we will have on our agenda the Minnesota Humanities Center. If we could have Chief Executive Officer Kevin Lindsay come forward, please. Welcome to the committee, Chief Executive Officer. If you will state your name for the record and please begin your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Kevin Lindsay, and I have the pleasure of serving as the CEO of the Minnesota Humanities Center. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about our request for additional funding to support the work of the Minnesota Humanities Center. A letter has been forwarded to you. Appreciating that time is short, I will try to keep my comments here to allow my colleague from the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council to testify as well. The vision of the Minnesota Humanities Center is a just society that's curious, connected, and compassionate. Curious that we come to conversations, open hearts, open minds, to authentically hear and listen to one another. Connected that we see ourselves tied to a garment of mutual destiny. What impacts one impacts the other. Compassion motivated beyond empathy to act. Motivated beyond empathy to act with compassion. The work of the Minnesota Humanities Center requires us to meet with a wide range of individuals in all 87 counties to seek to facilitate that respective vision. We see that within education, we see that in public discourse. Our work in trying to develop third way civics to be able to approach civics conversations in a non-polarizing work we're seeing more and more of a call for that type of work in K-12 as well as in colleges. We're now in 6 different colleges within the state of Minnesota. I was just briefly in the hall, and there was someone who approached me, and they started talking about education. I had to remind them that I was not Commissioner Jett, but they were very anxious to be able to say, how can their teachers, their administrators see their children for the value that they have as beautiful people who are going to shape the course of Minnesota going forward. I like to think that the work of the Minnesota Humanities Center and having folks to facilitate that outreach is critically important. I'd be remiss not to say, coming into the state legislature today, Insight News has a picture of Coretta Scott King for Women's History Month. And her daughter, Dr. Bernice King, is working with the Minnesota Humanities Center, coming to hopefully distribute books. It starts with me. This type of work where we have partnership with school districts, local community partners, again, to provide tools, provide education, provide books to various leaders, educational officials, community members, I think all brings us together. So we urge your support for this respective bill.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your being with us today and for your presentation. And then we will ask Shannon Jessic, is that how you say your last name? To please come forward with the Indian Affairs Council. And then we can have questions if the members have them. Thank you very much. Executive Director, if you'll state your name for the record and please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Shannon Gizik. It's an Ojibwe word that means cedar, and so I love being able to educate on our languages.
And forgive me.
I appreciate the time this morning. I had a letter too. I won't read it. I will give a very high-level overview of our agency and what we do. Currently, we have 2 statewide departments. We have a language grants department, and we receive funds through the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, the Legacy Amendment, to protect and revitalize our Ojibwe and Dakota, Minnesota's most endearing languages. We also have a cultural resource department where MIAC is charged with the protection of American Indian graves on public and private lands. And then we have myself doing the rest of the work for the agency. We also employ an assistant who, that position is vacant, but we are in need of a legislative and policy director. We have not had one since 2016, and I was that person. I also shared the responsibilities of a multi-million-dollar grant program, and so we are in need specifically for a full-time legislative director. We are the official liaison between the state government and tribal governments, and in the last several years, we have been working very diligently on building relationships and solidifying relationships between the tribes and the state. And with that, I'll leave it very short and leave room for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the 2 of you and the great work that you do for our state. Members, do you have any questions or concerns about the budgets that have been brought before us and that are contained in your budget books? Representative Nadeau.
I just have one. I was reading your legislative report, and I'm just curious. You know, one of the things that you had in there was the focus on trying to provide culturally specific teachers. And how are we measuring that? I mean, I totally agree. You know, I mean, and I'm just wondering how we're doing in that regard. We don't hear too much of that at least right now, and I'm just wondering how we're doing.
Thank you, Representative Nadeau. Sorry, I keep wanting to call you Commissioner. Please.
Representative, Madam Chair, and members of the committee, I believe within the materials you're referring to as the Minnesota Humanities Center, just because there's 2 members or 2 individuals up here at the table, just for clarity within the record. There is the Professional Educators Licensing Standards Board, PELSB, in which the legislature has provided money to. That facilitates recruiting and retention of teachers by local school districts, groups supporting efforts to diversify the local school districts have reached out to us The Minnesota Humanities Center is very fortunate to have a retreat center, and that has been efforts in which we have facilitated training for teachers, facilitated opportunities for paraprofessionals to begin thinking about how to become teachers. A lot of school districts are seeing opportunities to increase their success in reducing shortages of teachers by focusing in on paraprofessionals. And I would be remiss not to say that some of the educational work in which we provide teachers comes from our partnership with the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council in a wide variety of ways, and that has been warmly received by school districts throughout the state.
And would you like to respond as well?
I don't have a comment at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Noda, was there a follow-up? Thank you very much. Members, any other questions? Seeing none at this time, thank you both for being here and for your patience in waiting for us to get to you today. And for us making the error at the last meeting, I didn't realize that your office was present at that time, so I apologize.
And thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Right, and members, with that, we are recessed until 6:30 p.m. We will come back together. Lead Nash, if I can grab you before you leave. So we are in recess until 6:30 p.m.